Today, we're going to tackle a really tough question, one that sits right at the heart of modern progress. What happens when development for one group of people means absolute devastation for another? We're going to unpack this whole thing through the story of one of India's biggest development projects and the people who dared to stand in its way.
All right, so here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll look at the massive scale of the project itself. Then, we'll zoom right in to hear a really powerful personal story from someone who was directly affected. From there, we'll compare the two completely different worlds that are clashing. We'll also look at the incredible knowledge that's being lost. And finally, we'll zoom back out to see how this one struggle fits into a much bigger picture.
So, our story kicks off with the Narmada Valley Development Project. Now, this isn't just any project. It's one of the largest river development schemes in all of India. You can think of it as a massive symbol of modern engineering, designed to bring power and water to millions of people. And at the very heart of this huge undertaking is the Sardar Sarovar Dam. It's the biggest of more than 3,000 dams that were planned for the Narmada River. The vision was grand, a true powerhouse for generating electricity and irrigating huge areas of land. But, as you'll see, this vision came at a staggering price. First, let's talk about the environmental cost. The dam's reservoir ended up swallowing over 37,000 hectares of land. And this wasn't some useless, barren land either. We're talking about a mix of lush, dense forest and some of the most fertile farmland in the country. Just gone, forever, underwater. And then you have the human cost. And this number is just mind-boggling. More than 500,000 people were forced out of their ancestral homes. And here's the really crucial part. A huge number of these people were from Adivasi, or indigenous tribal communities, and Dalit communities, the very groups who have historically been the most vulnerable. To really understand what a number like 500,000 actually means, we need to shift from the big impersonal statistics to a deeply personal story. This comes to us from a letter written way back in 1994 by a man named Baba Maharya, a villager from Jalsindi, right as his home was about to disappear under the rising water. This one simple sentence, it just says it all, doesn't it? For them, it wasn't just about living near a river. It was their entire identity. For generations, their whole existence, their culture, their food, their religion, it was all completely intertwined with the life of the Narmada River. Now this is where you see the total disconnect. On one side, you have the city officials. They looked at the villagers' land and saw it as harsh, inhospitable, and the people as backward. They truly believed that moving them to Gujarat would develop them. But the villagers? They saw their lives as rich, fulfilling, and totally self-sufficient, all on the land their ancestors had cared for. Two completely different realities. And this became their final, unshakable position. This wasn't just some catchy protest slogan. It was a statement about how deep their connection to their home was. They would rather face death in the place they loved than be uprooted and forced into a life that was completely alien to them. So what does a community actually lose when they're resettled? What's really at stake here? Let's break it down and look at the life they had side by side with the life they were being pushed into. This table just lays it all out so clearly. Look at this. In Jalsindi, they grew all sorts of different crops to feed their families. In Gujarat, it would be all about growing one or two crops, like cotton, just for cash. They went from being totally self-sufficient farmers to being completely dependent on money, on markets, on moneylenders. In every single category, you see the same shift, from a connected, community-supported life to one of isolation, debt, and risk. Their entire way of life was being completely dismantled. But the losses go even deeper than just homes and livelihoods. Something else gets destroyed in this process, something you can't easily measure. We're talking about the loss of an enormous living library of knowledge that's been passed down for centuries. Baba Maharya explained it perfectly. For his people, the forest was quite literally everything. It gave them wood to build their homes, food when crops failed, and medicine when they were sick. It was a complete, sustainable ecosystem that didn't run on money. So what happens when you sever that connection to the land? All of this incredible knowledge just becomes useless. The deep understanding of which plants have medicinal properties, which fish are in the river at what time of year, how to build things from what's around you. This entire encyclopedia of how to live sustainably is at risk of just vanishing. And those are Baba Maharya's own words. They just capture the incredible sadness of this cultural loss. It isn't just about forgetting some facts. It's about losing an entire way of seeing and living in the world. Now, it's important to remember that the struggle in the Narmada Valley didn't just happen in a vacuum. It's actually part of a long, powerful history of people's environmental movements all across India, where local communities have stood up to protect their environment and their way of life.
One of the most famous examples, and maybe you've heard of this one, is the Chipko movement. Back in the 1970s, villagers, especially women, would literally hug trees to stop them from being cut down by logging companies. It was this incredible act of nonviolent resistance to save their forests.
It's that same spirit of resistance that really fueled the movement in our story. The opposition to the Sardar Solovar Dam grew into this huge social movement called the Narmada Bachao Andolan, which means Save the Narmada Movement. The NBA became the voice for the displaced, fighting for their rights and for a better, more sustainable idea of what development could be.
And when you boil it all down, at the heart of the Chipko movement, the Narmada Bachao Andolan, and so many others, the core demand is the same. It's the simple, powerful idea that local communities should have control over the resources, the land, the forest, the water, that their lives depend on.
And don't for a second think this is all just ancient history. This conflict between development and local rights is still happening right now. And in the last few decades, it's gotten even more intense because of the growing demand for minerals. Just take a look at this chart. Ever since India's economy opened up in the early 1990s, the amount of mineral extraction for both use at home and for export has just exploded. This massive increase in mining creates new, intense fights over land, often in the exact same areas where Adivasi communities live. And this brings us right back to where we started, to that fundamental conflict. Baba Mahara's letter is just such a powerful, heartbreaking reminder of this truth. The dam that promised development and progress for cities meant the complete and total destruction of his world. So as we wrap this up, we're left with a really powerful and, honestly, a pretty unsettling question. When we're chasing progress, but the benefits all go to one group, while the costs are all paid by another, we really have to stop and ask ourselves, what does progress actually mean? And who gets to decide?